So this is the start of a kind of off-the-cuff little series. Not that my channel has found its distinctive artistic voice or anything, and I'm just a guy messing around with toy reviews and videos about why I like King Kong and stuff like that. And in my Kong videos, I've discussed how I'm not exactly a fan of the monsters, in that I don't typically root for a specific monster, like I'm rooting for a professional wrestler or something like that. I like the movies the monsters are in, and I'm interested in the ideas the monsters represent. And that tends to be the lens through which I say I like or don't like certain monsters. That said, it doesn't mean that I don't have my own aesthetic tastes, and I can't say which monsters I think look cooler than others, or have more interesting abilities, or more interesting ideas they're representing. So, I thought I would do this off-the-cuff series of my top 5 favorite kaijus, or versions thereof, beginning, of course, with the big guy himself, Godzilla. So number 5, Millennium Godzilla. Take a journey back with me to the late 1990s. It was the era of being edgy and extreme. Image Comics is a thing, Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails, hackers, the original Ghost in the Shell anime, The Matrix, Blade, The Crow, Sting vs. the NWO, the Attitude Era, everything in black leather, and everyone looking super dark and edgy. Now take Heisei Godzilla and filter him through the lens of late 90s extreme, dark, and edgy, and there's your Millennium Godzilla. Arguably, as early as King Kong vs. Godzilla, Godzilla had already dropped the sort of scarred atomic monstrosity look, and had become basically a really big dinosaur with scaly skin. I wouldn't call any version of normal Godzilla my favorite, because it gets too far from what Godzilla is meant to represent, as a horror born of nuclear violence. But if I was going to pick one, I'd go with the Millennium version, because he is so nostalgically edgy. It looks like he wants to destroy Tokyo to a soundtrack by My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. Number 4, Little. OMG, he's so cute! That's really all I have to say about this one-off version of Baby Godzilla. They nailed making him absolutely adorable. I also kind of love they were able to translate him almost directly over to Godziban. Like, he's already so cute, they didn't have to change much about him to make a cute puppet version. That said, he's also really cool when he's all grown up. 4.5 on my list is the adult version of Godzilla Jr. from Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex. And I know some fans debate this, but Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex picks up directly where Godzilla vs. Destoroyah left off. So it's safe to say that this is intended to be Little all grown up. And this look definitely works, because it does communicate that sort of scarred, mutated idea of Godzilla. One feature I really like is that he's not just scarred, but scabbed over. When the Gigans try to buzzsaw into him, they can't penetrate his mottled, lumpy, and scabbed flesh. Number 3, Godzilla The Ride. Now take Little all grown up, clean him up a bit, work out some of the visually unsatisfying kinks, and you get the version from Godzilla The Ride at the Seiboen Amusement Park in Saitama Prefecture, just outside Tokyo. I think this version of Godzilla strikes a really nice balance between a traditional dinosaurian Godzilla and the scarred atomic mutation. It has a little bit of that Heisei look about him, with some nice scales on his arms and legs that communicate dinosaur, but he has the scarred, scabbed, folded skin of an atomic bomb or a burn victim. The last time I went to Japan was in 2009, when Godzilla The Ride didn't even exist, so suffice it to say that I am looking forward to going back at some point, and being able to see this Godzilla firsthand, as it were. The only thing that's kept me from ordering the Bondi soft vinyl is that I want to save getting it as an actual souvenir. Number 2, the original Gojira. Now I admit this one might just be a bit sentimental. Sometimes the suit and the puppet are a bit dodgy, but they really work with what they have really well in the dark, moody cinematography of the original film. And while he does give birth to the Showa and Heisei era Godzillas to follow, the intent behind him was to imitate the keloid scarring of Hiroshima victims. It was actually a toss-up for me who should get the number one spot. Sentiment almost won out in putting the original Gojira at the top. As classic as he is, though, I still have to admit that his position is mainly because, in my mind, he represents the original film as a whole, less than for aesthetic sensibilities of the suit itself. Kind of like how there have been better-looking Frankenstein monsters, but there's never been a more classic Frankenstein monster than Boris Karloff's. There have been better Godzilla suits, but there's never been a more classic one. That brings us to number 1, Shingojira. Hideaki Anno's Shingojira may well be the most damned perfect Godzilla ever created. This is the first Godzilla I've ever actually been scared of. There's always a kind of mental dissociation between the aesthetic joy of watching Godzilla stomp stuff and communicating the horror of what Godzilla is. I mean, usually that's Toho's own fault, whether because they've deliberately made him a cute superhero or saddle him with substandard directors. One of the things I love about the original Gojira is that it does overcome its limitations to craft a film in the grand old tradition. To use the Frankenstein analogy again, the makeup on Boris Karloff might be a bit dodgy today, and the monster himself is not likely to cause shrieks to peel out, but the quality of the film does still effectively communicate the existential horror of what the monster represents, and the original Gojira does that too. And then there's Shingojira, the first Godzilla without limitations. Okay, there might be a couple CGI lapses, but overall, man, Shin is terrifying. He makes me cringe with body horror. He looks like an abomination. A monstrous tumor come to life. Eyes and teeth and mouths growing where you'd really rather they didn't. Radioactive blood gushing from any random orifice. Scabbed, scarred, and cooked like a burn victim with no actual skin left. Jerkily stumbling along like his body is not put together in a normal way, with a hint of H.R. Geiger-style biomechanical horror. Just, ugh. I'll call your attention to one subtle detail. His hands. Look at his hands. Downward-facing palms, like the pronated hands of a dinosaur in Jurassic Park, communicate something predatory. If you look at most Godzillas, they have downward or slightly inward-facing palms. The slight inward facing can communicate friendliness, or at least, indifference. Like Godzilla's ready to hug you, or just doesn't know what to do with his hands. But Shin's palms up position, with his fingers clawed, that is the position of someone in agony. Like someone in a seizure, or being burnt alive. So this monstrous tumor, this blood-belching mutation, is in perpetual agony and mindlessly acting out against the world. It's mutating to survive and carry on an existence that it also wants to die from. Shudder. I suppose I could even break down which forms of Shin I like most. Kamata-kun, second form, makes me laugh. Mainly because he's adorably gross, but also because he's basically Manila. That is Shin Manila, baby Godzilla. My favorite form is actually the third form, the deformed, land-dwelling version of Shin Manila. Kamata-kun. Second form. Those large, fishy eyes nicely communicate something eerie and alien. But sure, fourth form is nothing to sneeze at. Then there's his hypothetical future forms that we didn't see. And I'm not sold on the little humanoid monsters, but then there's concept art of Shin evolving into a quote-unquote godlike entity that looks like a cross between Shin and Rei from Evangelion. I can very much see Hideaki Anno turning Godzilla into some kind of horrifying Lovecraftian cosmic entity, followed by me shrieking in Shinji-like insanity. There shouldn't be a sequel to Shin Gojira, but if we're going to speculate, you could do a sequel to Shin Gojira where he's just starts spawning Shin Rodans and Shinigirises, but the sequel I'd really want to see ends with a Shin Third Impact. But anyway, so there you go. My top 5 favorite Godzillas. I've already planned a couple more of these with different kaiju, so I guess stay tuned for those, and thanks for watching this one. My channel has started picking up, so thank you to my new subscribers. And if you haven't already, please do like, share, subscribe, smoke signal, semaphore, or whatever it is you're supposed to do. And if you have any requests for like kaijus or monsters of any size or scale, then please do put the request down in the comments.